I'm pretty excited. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts, Thin Coats with me, Phil the Glacial Geek. I'm coming to you here today with some exciting news. The Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts is now sponsored by The Army Painter. They were super kind enough to send me over their line of paints and brushes and all of their different base materials and things, and I'm super excited to get into using them. I'd been using some of their paints and trying them out, and was very excited with how they painted. They went on smooth. I really liked the idea with the dropper bottles. I don't have to worry about the top thing flipping down on me. So I was super excited about that, and then talking with them, they were excited to work with me, and that makes me excited to work with them. Anytime someone's excited about working with me, it instantly makes me more excited to work with them. So I've got their range of paints now that I'm just at the very edge of figuring out how to even approach this. I've never even come close to having this many options for paint. So it's like if I wanted to paint green, I had my option of green or green, and now I've got like a dozen different green colors that I can choose from. So I'm pretty excited. I think it's really going to hopefully up my game being able to do that. I'm still not a professional painter, but I'm excited to get to use these and show off what they can do, because I think that's going to be awesome for you guys to see as well as for me to actually do. So I'm pretty excited about that. I've heard really great things about their washes, and I'm excited to really get into it. And they've got all the different colors of washes that I need that I've been using, especially for these guys, which are going to be working on my Genestealer Cult. You may also notice that I've got a different handle here that I'm using. These are the painting handles from a Games Envy, who also were kind enough to send me over some materials to try out. So this is their basic painting handle. It comes with this little bar here and a base. You can choose different colors. I chose Glacial Geek colors. So it's pretty cool. The model themselves are put onto basically soda bottle caps. You can get a bunch of caps in a pack. You can also just use, I think, soda bottle caps, and you just tack the model on, and they spin off, and you don't have to worry about touching the model even when you're spinning this off, which would be great for having like a horde army that you're trying to paint. You can just get a bunch of bottle caps that you have on there, and you could just keep batch painting when you're going through, which is something that I am facing now with the Genestealer Cult. Maybe not today, but in general that I'm facing. I'm painting a lot more guys that are all the same model, a lot more with this army than I am with my my other armies that I've done. When you move to hordes from Marines, it takes a bit to get used to, but that's what I'm working on. So I'm super excited to give these a shot too. I'm really liking it. It's pretty comfy to be able to handle like this. It keeps it steady. It also allows you to spin it so that you've still got the same comfort. So they were basically, the way it works as opposed to other ones is that you can find how it's comfortable to hold it, and then you keep that hold the entire time when you've got it, and just work with that, and then you can spin the model so you don't have to keep spinning the handle around and get in your way. You just keep spinning the base there around so it can get to it. They also have, which is actually now on Kickstarter, which is going up, is their extra large their ergonomic holder, which is pretty good because this actually feels really comfortable to hold, which is the same one. This one will spin a little bit, I don't have to spin the top, but you can if you want to, but I'm just going to go with this. That also comes, they also have out an extra large handle that you can try, so I have to give that a shot too. Still giving these guys a shot, but so far I'm a big fan of them, and the fact that you just have basically soda bottle caps that you can pin all your different models onto, and if you just want to take it off, you just spin it off, place it down, put on the next one, and you're good to go. So that's pretty exciting to be able to do that. So yeah, so that's what we've got going on today. I'm going to be working on painting up the Biophagus, which is the guy that buffs up the aberrants, along with his little minion there, and then I also kit bashed another Kellermorph. I had an extra I had an extra Primus model that was sitting around that I had gotten when I'd gotten a whole bunch of extra models back in 7th edition. Honestly, it's been sitting in a box for a long time. And I felt like I wanted another Keller morph, but I couldn't quite get I didn't want to get my hands on another one of the Kill Team kits yet, and until it comes out in its own. I figured I would kit bash one, so it's all GW parts. So basically, I just I cut off the sword hand and gave him put a pistol on there. I think this is like a 2nd edition pistol that came on the sprue that I had in my bits box. And then I also didn't glue in his the toxin injector claw on this arm, and then I just put in cut off at the elbow basically, and put in one of the arms from the Acolyte. So it's an auto pistol gun from the Acolyte squads. So that's what I'm going to be painting, and appropriately enough, what I'm going to be talking about today is actually going to be the Genestealer Cult Codex, and kind of getting into what my experience has been with it, avenues that I think they're super effective, where they're going to have trouble, in my opinion, and trying to come up with ideas on how to effectively handle that kind of thing. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start over here. I've gotten my different colors that I'm going to do. So I'm going to start on my guy here. I'm going to go with his with the elemental bolt, which is going to be along the same color as their robes that I've been doing with them. So that's the one I'm going to do for this to start off with. But getting into the Genestealer Cult, I am super happy with this codex so far. It's giving me headaches trying to figure out what direction to take with them, and what the best route to take with them, and how to really formulate like a really strong list that I think is going to be good in tournaments. But I think that's a good thing. You know, I think at the end, towards the end there with my Dark Angels, I had something that worked really well with the Azrael Hellblaster Bomb, and when I tried to veer out of it, I ran into some troubles, and not having that kind of flexibility made it a little bit more difficult for me to really find my way and find what would make me most happy with how everything was going. So along those lines, I think that having the kind of flexibility and the different options and different directions that you can go with these is really great. Some of the best units that I've had so far have been the Acolytes. I think that now with their point drop down to 7 points, it makes them hugely effective for their point draw. They have 2 attacks base that you can buff up their strength relatively easy and in a number of different ways, and you can take them in squads of 20, and you've got them getting into there with their rending claws are really just going to do a number on pretty much any unit that they get into combat with. Again, they suffer the same, I think, problem that most of this codex suffers, which is they're tough 3. They're a little bit squishy, so it becomes very important to get them into the assault as quick as possible, because any kind of attention from the enemy, and they're going to suffer for it. So I highly suggest using them, and I'm trying to figure this out too myself, and trying to figure out maybe waves of guys coming in from underground, so that you have multiple giant squads of Acolytes that'll come in, but you only come in one at a time, so that you can have the characters to buff them and to properly support them, because our characters are super strong and super effective at buffing different units such as the Acolytes. But there's we're limited to how many of them that we can have, and making sure that they all get into the right place and are all within range to buff a unit becomes difficult, especially if your opponent either plays it really cagey or spreads out so far that it becomes hard to keep up with everywhere that they're going. So I had some experience with a 20-man blob with 4 rock saws that were just brutal when they got into combat. But the problem is, once they're out of combat, they become really easy for your opponent to handle, and they're going to handle them. It's just it's not a matter of if they will handle them, it's just how and when, because at that point they're tough 3, 1 wound with 5 up armor save. They're essentially just guardsmen at that point, and the guardsmen are taken kind of as screens. So if your unit for punching things is just going to be is as tough and able to handle the attention of the enemy as a screen for another army, you know that you're in for a tough day. And being in for a tough day doesn't mean that they're useless, and doesn't mean that you shouldn't take them and that they're not effective, because the fact is that they're cheap. So, you know, at 7 points apiece, they can die, and they don't take up a large chunk of your army at that point, as long as you know how to keep them around. And our characters, a lot of our characters are the same way. They're still just as squishy as those guys. So I think that having these kind of units that could then buff them and keep them around is going to be important. And having the bodies around to screen out your characters, because most of our characters are just as squishy, you know, tough 3, except unless you get into like the Abominant or the Patriarch, most of our stuff is tough 3. And at that point, you know, they're dying to bolter fire. They're dying to las gunfire at that point, you know? So it becomes important, pretty much imperative, that you keep them safe, so that you keep your characters behind groups of neophytes and brood brothers and acolytes, and that you keep and that you make sure that you get your acolytes into combat. Because once they're in combat, I mean, they can do a number on anyone there. You know, people used to be afraid of just hordes of Purestrains going in there, but at this point, 15 points for a Purestrain, you can get 2 acolytes, and they've got just as many attacks as a Purestrain does. Just as many attacks as a Purestrain does it at 10 or more. So if you drop it down to, if the enemy is shooting up your Purestrains, you get down to 9 men on the Purestrains, and you get down to, you know, twice as many points as that in acolytes. Suddenly now you have, you know, less attacks than you would have had to. So even if you have them at full strength, you're getting just as many attacks with twice as many acolytes as you do, but you have twice as many wounds. You've got Rending Claws, which is the same thing, same strength, but the thing is you can also buff them up with cult abilities that you can't with the Purestrains in this edition. So it becomes, you know, in my opinion, from what my experience has been with how they perform, I would take Acolytes over Purestrains any day with our new codex. There's ways of getting pretty awesome Genestealers, with the, you know, with Tyranids, but honestly, I don't think Genestealer Cult are the way to go if you want to run a whole bunch of Purestrain. Genestealers, I think that the way to go is Acolytes. I think the way to go is some of the other models that just, you know, that work better together. Because the thing is, there's a lot of synergies in this army that need to work together to make you do what you need them to do. So for instance, if you can drop in an Acolyte squad, you use the stratagem to get them to move an additional d6 inches closer. So now you're looking at, you know, a 9 minus d6 inch charge. You get a Clamavis within 6 inches of that squad. Suddenly now they've got a 9 minus d6 minus 1 inch charge that they're trying to make in there, because they get +1 from the Clamavis. If you have them in there as the 4-armed Emperor, they get an additional +1 to their charge. If you have them in there with an Acolyte Icon Ward with the Warlord trait from Vigilus, from the Brood Surge Resurgent, Brood Surge Resurgent formation. Basically, you've got you can re-roll that roll, and at that point, it becomes just a matter of trying to take care of Overwatch. And there's some ways that you can. So you have a Magus casting Mass Hypnosis onto the unit that you're trying to charge into, or you have a Patriarch or somebody with the Amulet of the Void Worm, which means that they cannot be Overwatched, running in there first to take up the Overwatch. And it becomes very easy to get them into Assault out of Deep Strike, as long as you don't roll like me sometimes. But can more consistently be able to get them into attack there. And that's where I'm thinking about changing in when it comes into tactics. That, like, the impulse is turn 2, just drop everything in, because why are you going to hold things in reserve where they can't affect the game? But I think what you need to do is you need to go kind of one squad at a time and just consistently keep pressure on your opponent. If you can consistently keep pressure on your opponent, keep them in combat, keep them having to fall back, just not letting them get out and move around the table. You're going to be, that's where I think Genestealer Cult become effective. I think that they're really good at board control. I think they're really good at keeping pressure on the on your opponents, and if you can do that effectively, you'll be able to win. You know, we have to play. I think a lot of times we're going to have to play to the objectives. If you go into a game thinking that you're just going to just try to like murderate your opponent, I think you're going to have a harder time. Like I said, because we're not resilient, we can't stick around longer, so we die pretty quickly, and we quickly lose our potency as the game goes on. But if you can make those first couple turns when you're coming out of deep strike effective and strong, then you can garner enough points and hurt your enemy enough that at the end of the day you've got more points than they are. I think it's going to be a lot of attrition wars that you're going to be fighting with these guys, but fun attrition wars. You know, like when you're killing knights in close combat. I think you've got yourself something that's going to be a lot of fun. You know what I mean? There's ways of buffing them up and making them super fun. There's a stratagem in the Brood Surge Resurgent which allows them to get +1 to wound in a fight phase. So suddenly now, if you can buff up the guys with the saws, you get them up there that they're wounding knights on 2s. It's awesome, you know, doing 2 damage apiece with AP -4, unless they've got that invul save in close combat, which they might take. But at that point, if they're taking that, then they're leaving themselves off. You know, you don't have to worry about Call's Wrath or anything like that, trying to shoot you off the table. And I think we become super effective again as a very alpha strikey army. Our first couple attacks into them have to be strong, have to be pretty well shot in there. Like, you have to make sure that you really get in there and make some noise when you drop in there. Which is why I'm really liking the Four-Armed Emperor, because that +1 to charge when they come in from reserves is crucial. I think that extra inch for charge is pretty awesome. You know, it also works with your aberrants if you get them in an Anointed Throng detachment, and you get the Warlord. You give the Abominant from that detachment, the Warlord trait from that. Suddenly your aberrants are at +1 to their charge because of the Abominant being there. They also get +1 to their charge because of the Cult ability with Four-Armed Emperor, and then they get +1 to the charge if you have a Clamavis near them. So, you know, even if you just drop them in 9 inches away, they've got +3 to their charge. Odds are you're going to be getting a 9. You know, odds are you can get a 6 between those 2 dice with a reroll. Don't get me wrong, I've messed up many times with that myself, but you know, it's certainly more feasible than just hoping for a 9-inch charge to get in there. So, like I said, it's going to take a little bit more honing in on tactics and how to play them, because I've had a couple times when I've tried to be aggressive and tried to be, in my opinion, possibly even greedy with what I've tried to do, and I have my units going in there and dropping units that don't have the support, you know, 9 inches away, and trying to get off that 9-inch charge. And if it works, it works, and it does well. But when it doesn't work, I'm then, you know, myrtleated real quick, and it becomes hard for me to find to come back from that at that point, because of the fact that it becomes so effective at, you know, the fact is that they're squishy. So if they don't get in that charge, if they don't make it in there, if they don't, you know, start to do what they do best right off the bat there, they die real quick. So you have to keep that in mind. You also have to keep in mind that, you know, losing a couple isn't the end of the world. So, you know, if you've got them there in a squad of 20, losing a couple of guys to Overwatch is not the end of the day. Or losing a couple of guys to you know, unquestioning loyalty is not the end of the day. Especially if they do it for a good purpose. Like I said, like absorbing Overwatch for a character that you want to get in there, or just taking some of the wounds off of a character who happened to get into the wrong place at the wrong time and put themselves in the line of danger. Keeping your characters alive and keeping those buffs going is huge, because without them, I think we are in trouble. Because if we're just relying on our base abilities, there's nothing special. A lot of our guys are either, you know, a lot of our guys are just basic basic units that aren't necessarily the most effective and strong units in the game. That's just that's just kind of how it works there. So keeping that in mind, I think another thing that makes us very strong is our ability to have a major effect in the psychic phase. Our psychers are not super expensive. Our patriarchs and our magus are not super expensive, and they've got some really awesome, effective powers that they can use. One of the top ones is Mental Onslaught. You've got to have some luck, but there's ways of making it less lucky, that you can make it a little bit more consistent. But at the same time, a bad luck roll can always throw off your day here. I mean, that could be the same thing of anything, but Mental Onslaught is going to be, I think, an effective use for hitting your opponent's big targets, or targets that are going to cause you the most trouble, such as flyers or knights, things like that. Or it might be helpful in clearing off some secondary threats while you throw your main force of your big 20-man Acolyte blob into your opponent's knight. You can use Mental Onslaught to try to handle some of the Armiger Warglaives that they use to pump up to get a full detachment. Essentially what it does is you've got it. If it goes off, you do a contested leadership test that you're rolling off there, and there's easy ways of buffing up your patriarchs so that they're leadership 12 are easily leadership 12, and there's other ways of getting it up to higher leadership 13 or so. But leadership 12 is super easy to get. All you have to do is put him next to a Clamavis, gives him +1 leadership, and you use the Brood Coven stratagem at the beginning of the game to give it gives your Magus and a Primus a Warlord trait. And what I've been doing is I've been giving my Magus +3 inches to his aura, so he's got a 9-inch aura for the +1 to hit, so that when they deep strike in, he can still give a unit. If he doesn't make it into combat, he can still give a unit that did the +1 to hit, which is always super effective and super awesome. Hitting on 2s for most of our units is awesome. And then I give the Magus the Warlord trait from the basic rulebook, the leadership one, which gives him an aura of 6 inches that gives +1 leadership. Most of the time that was for worrying about morale, but now you suddenly you put him and you put the Clamavis within 6 inches of a Patriarch. That Patriarch is now leadership 12, and he's going into like an Armiger Warglaive that's at leadership 8, or he's going into a big heavy tank that's leadership 8, and you start rolling dice, and at that point they're hoping that you roll a 1 and that they happen to roll a 5 or a 6, and that's pretty good odds at that point. You've got a 4 up, you got a +4 to your roll off, which is always super effective, and then you just keep doing it until it's dead, or they succeed. And unless you're really unlucky with the dice, which it can happen very easily, you can do it. And if you manage to get it off, you do that power first because it's important to get it off. And then if you don't have to spend the CP to re-roll to get it off, you can use that CP to re-roll one of the dice when you're in there. So if you happen to roll that 1 early, you can just be like, I'm spending a CP to re-roll this to get out of that 1, and hopefully don't roll back into a 1, and make it happen. And I think it's super effective. If it goes well, it can be super effective. If it doesn't go well, it can be super disappointing. But I mean, it's just a psychic power, so it's not the end of the day. But I think it's important. It can be a very important tool when you're trying to face some of the more difficult challenges that I think that the Genestealer cult are going to face. So let's get into that. So yeah, basically the shining gem, I think, of this edition is the fact that we've got some cheap troop choices that are super effective, can be easily buffed up, and can do a real number on your opponent's army. One of the characters have buffs that are super awesome, between +1 to charge, getting back CP so you don't have to waste a relic or a warlord trait on it, getting the ability to buff up your aberrants with the biophages, like the guy I've been painting here, or just having some really cool the +1 to hit with the Jackal Alphys. Like, it's awesome stuff that you can do with these characters, and I think that finding those synergies that work together and can work effectively are really the way forward with this army. So get your Primus up there for the +1 to hit. You get your Icon Ward up there so that you got +1 strength with the Relic Banner. Or reroll to charges even just alone with that. You've got the Clamavis for +1 to charge. You choose a trait that gives you the abilities that you want. So you've got Twisted Helix +1 strength. You've got the Four-Armed Emperor for the +1 to charge. You've got I think it's the Rusted Cog that gives you, you can ignore the -1 to shots. You get +1 to saves for 0 or AP 0 or AP -1 shots against you, which makes you a little bit more, doesn't kill you as fast against things like las guns or bolter shots anymore. And you go with that kind of stuff, and the buffs that they all get are pretty fantastic. I think things that we're going to run into trouble with is going to be, honestly, flyers. Flyers is one of the big problems that I think they have, because we don't have super effective counters to flyers. Like, we don't have super strong shooting that can be buffed up really well. We don't have our own flyers to act as counter flyers. We don't have. It just becomes they become a pain to really handle. We've got board control that we could try to dictate where that flyer can go, but at the end of the day, it becomes very difficult to take them out. And there are some flyers out there, like the Vultures, that just have such a high number of shots and amount of DACA that they're going to become very easy. They're going to become very easy for them to kind of get one up on you and start mulching at your dude bros, because I think the strength in this codex and the strength in this army is going to be in the number of shots that you can get, the number of bodies that you can get on the table. I think Horde is the way to go with these guys. Even when it comes to aberrants, they're expensive, but they're not superly prohibitively expensive. So they're not as expensive as like an Ogren, for instance. And they've got the ability to just be buffed up and be awesome and just wreck some face, which is really cool to get them in there. But like I said, you need to get them in combat, and the second you put some interest into them, they can start to go down, because they've got a 5-up save, they got a 5-up Feel No Pain, which is nice. If the Icon Wards around them, they can reroll 1s on that, which is super. That makes them one of the more resilient forces units in our codex, which is really nice. And they also draw a lot of focus because of how nasty they look and nasty they sound, especially on paper. So you can use them almost like a distraction Carnifex, where if they get into combat, yeah, bully, that's pretty awesome. But if not, they're drawing attention away from your acolytes, who are going to just be wrecking face whenever they get into combat there, and can be buffed up to nigh, with the saws. I had at one point I was looking at strength 14. And then +1 to wound with that thing, and like I said, wounding knights on 2s, which is awesome. An AP -4, knights don't really get invul saves in close combat like that. So unless they spend unless they spend the CP to get the relics. But yeah, flyers are going to be tough, because we don't really have a strong answer, because a lot of the answer to most problems that Genestealer Cult are going to face is charge them, assault them, and punch them in the face. That's the best answer that our army has to pretty much anything. So if they can't do that because they're a flyer, then you're left with a situation where you go, okay, well, if I can't do that, what do I do? And the answer is, there's not a lot that we can do. I think, like I said, I think you're always going to have trouble with them, but one of the big answers is you could try to overwhelm them with shots. I think with the Hand Flamers, you have a 20-man squad of Acolytes with Hand Flamers, pop the stratagem to pop them up 3 inches away, and then they're just unloading onto flyers. Flamers are the answer to flyers, and if you've got 20 D6 shots in there, looking for 6s to wound, but, that's a lot of shots to try to get down those wounds, and suddenly if you start taking them off, they become less effective. And then you have Mental Onslaught that you can try to pop something out there with. When you've got the Mental Onslaught game going on there pretty strongly, it can really just do a number on any kind of vehicle, especially, a flyer like that. And a lot of them don't have answers to mortal wounds. So if you've got, -2 to hit because of it being, an Alatok flyer. Doesn't really make a difference if you've got auto hit flamers or you've got mortal wounds coming from a psychic test that doesn't require you to hit. So that's kind of what I'm seeing for them. Be careful about flyers, and I think there's going to be a lot of flyer heavy lists, especially after LVO, where one of the final two armies had 7 flyers in it. So I think you're going to see a return of flyer heavy lists that are going to be super effective in tournaments, and it's something that I think Genestealer cults are going to struggle with. I think most other armies they're going to be able to handle pretty well. I think another thing that they're going to have trouble with is going to be Tau, because again, if your answer is charge it, Tau are really effective against charges. They've got the hitting on 5s, they got the supporting fire, and what it comes down to at that point is you just need to be very strategic about what you do. So use your character with the Amulet of the Void Worm to go tie up units so they can't fire Overwatch. You use the Magus with Mass Hypnosis to keep other units from being able to fire Overwatch, and just try to get into their face and fight them. One of the benefits that we have against Tau is that they have to castle really hard, because a lot of their strength comes from synergies as well, and comes from staying still. And turn 1, they don't know what's going on with us. Our entire deployment is either underground or under blips, and at that point, there's nothing they can do about it. And they just have to make basically a castle and hope that they can shoot us. But their range on a lot of their shooting weapons is not super good. There's some that you're not gonna be able to hide from everything. But if you can get behind cover, move those blips, use the stratagems to put things back underground that were on the table, use the stratagems to put down extra blips, and just keep them guessing. And they're either going to have to spread out to try to face wherever you come from, which is going to be super ineffective for Tau, or they're going to castle up really hard to try to handle you, and in which case that first turn you avoid where they are, and throw some mortars in there to clear off some of their drones, throw in some other things, and hide a bunch of units so that come turn 2 you can drop in and start trying to charge with our ability to ignore some Overwatch. You're not going to avoid all of it, but like I said, you can take some hits. They're only hitting on 5s, which, I mean, if they take Tau, which they probably will, they're hitting on 5s in Overwatch, and then they've got supporting fire, which is always strong. But you could also use it as a feint, where you try to charge in one unit off to this side and try to force them to use supporting fire, which means that they can't fire Overwatch next time. So you charge in over here, takes the supporting fire, and then you charge in over on the other side, and they've already shot at you, and they can't do it anymore. It's tough. It's tough. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not making this out to be that super easy. It's like, well, GG Tau. It's gonna be tough. They've got a lot of really good DACA. They've got a lot of really good shooting, and they're really, I mean, they're not good in close combat, so they're really good at staying out of close combat. A lot of their things fly that you're trying to lock down, so you're not gonna be able to lock them down too well. And you've just got to do your best to try to get in there and make that first strike just super painful for them, so that they can't bounce back from it. Another benefit of all of this is that it causes them to castle up really hard, and once they're castled up really hard, it becomes hard for them to maneuver and out of it. It becomes really easy for you to then drop in on the board and take control of the board, so jump onto objectives and really make a fight of it for your army. So, sure, we're a very assault-heavy force, which becomes becomes a strong point for the Tau to be able to handle an assault-heavy force. But unlike a lot of other assault-heavy forces, we have the ability to really jump out there and take a lot of ground control that a lot of other armies have difficulty with. So with that in mind, it becomes better for us, because if you can keep that pressure on them and just keep wave after wave of Dubros just charging in there and getting into close combo with them, taking down units, wrapping up units, hiding from units, they can't then really jump out and find their way out into the other objectives, and you can win out the day playing to the mission. And that's what it comes down to, is you've got to play to the mission. And I think this army, I say this army above all others, every army has to play to the missions, but this army especially I think, benefits from playing to the mission and playing to the objectives of the game, and making sure that you're jumping on those secondaries, making sure that you're jumping in and really causing a nuisance into the army. And understand that your assaults are there's two reasons for your assaults. One is to kill things. That's how we kill things. And number two is to tie up the enemy, either physically, if they don't have the fly ability, so that they either are falling back and not being able to shoot, or even if they can fly, that you're just tying them up, preoccupying them so that they can't spread out and go and make their other additions. We become really, there's some secondaries that become easy to get on us. Reaper comes to mind, because you're going to be going in there with a lot of units, a lot of models. So keep that in mind when you're going in there. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're playing missions with the sudden death rule, that you need to be on that table until turn 2. And it becomes, if you face off against a very aggressive, mobile, shooty force, that first turn could be very painful if you don't have units that can withstand the kind of DACA they're going to throw at you, or that can hide from them. One of my latest battle reports has me facing off against White Scar bikers and 2 flyers against Space Marines, and they've got the new Better Beta Bolter rule is going to have the number of shots that they're just going to wail into you, and the ability to get all over that table becomes very difficult to hide from your opponent, and it becomes easy for them to try to get you and wean you down and then eventually table you. But if you can find a way, have a couple strong units, maybe a Lehman Russ, because that's strength 8, the toughness 8. The thing is, if you have the Lehman Russ, it becomes an obvious target against knights. But if you go against a whole bunch of bolters, it becomes that tough 8 becomes very difficult for them to kill in 1 turn, or kill in 2 turns, which is key. So I think if at that point you maybe hold it back at the back of your deployment zone, and when you're putting down all the blips and you can see where your opponent goes, you can run and hide away from the stronger shooting and just keep him alive, because if he's still there come turn 2, the rest of your army is going to be dropping in. Because I have been utilizing the 3 units back down into underground for deep striking, and every game, just because what I do is trying to figure out the number of units, because you have to have half the number of units on the table, and deploying underneath blips counts as being deployed under the table, on the table. So you have to have half the number as blips, and you have to have half the point levels as blips with the new rules. So it becomes very difficult, because a lot of the things that you're keeping on the table and hiding, some of the like the Nexos or a Brood Brothers squad, are very cheap, and a lot of the things that you want to be able to jump out, like a 20-man Acolyte squad or a 10-man Aberrant squad, or Patriarchs, they can be expensive. They can be a big chunk of the army that you want to try to keep in reserves. So what I've been doing is I've been placing 3 expensive units on the table as blips, knowing that they boost that level of the numbers for that side. So putting Aberrants on the table, put a Patriarch on the table, put the big giant squad of Acolytes on the table, and suddenly my points are skewed now to what things are on the table. And then for 1 CP, you draw those 3 back underground and can drop them in there. And at that point, you put down your Nexos first before you fill up those 3, and you can try to roll to get that CP back even. So, like I said, it's not guaranteed, and we are very CP hungry, but it is so effective that I've always used it. And it just makes so much sense for what we do, because we are way more dangerous coming out of Deep Strike than we are at any other portion. So if you can get down there and get into charge range out of Deep Strike, that's how you're going to be effective. And if you've got the more units you can get out of Deep Strike, the better you're going to be. And like I said, trying to figure out a good gameplay with that becomes difficult, and I think it's going to take still more practice on my part. I've played a bunch of games, but I'm nowhere near narrowing in exactly how I'm going to play or what army I'm going to have to do with them. I'm still in that basic stage of trying to figure it all out, and it's fun and it's frustrating, and it's giving me an aneurysm trying to figure this all out with all the different options, because there's so many different things you could do, like bikers with demo charges, going in there and throwing them all in, about 5d6, 5d6 strength 8 AP minus 3 d3 damage shots is pretty glorious. You've got all sorts of things. Hand flamers on Acolytes, or just go cheap with the rending claws on Acolytes. The power picks, which give you the in aberrants, so that they can get twice as many attacks essentially, because you can have a rending claw attack for every power pick attack that you do. Hitting on 2s, getting 6s exploding because of the abominant. Like, there's so many different things that are going on, and so many different intricate interactions that you have between the characters and the forces, that this is a very mentally taxing force to try to use and try to figure out a good strategy and a good battle that can go with them. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to try. So I'm still working on it, and I'm still going to keep building up. And I would love to hear what you guys have to say about how you guys have been using them, or how you've been facing them, or just some thoughts that you've had based upon what you've seen or heard, and keep that going. So again, I want to thank the Army Painter, and I want to thank Game Envy. You can check out. I'll make sure I have links to both of them in the descriptions below to go check them out. These are super comfortable to use. I really like them a lot. And between the two, I'm not sure which one I like better, because this is what I'm more used to, and I think a lot of people are more used to, which is how to. And basically, it's just one of the bases there that just clips into. So it's basically just the regular base that you have for that, and then you just clip it. It just kind of like pops into there, and just becomes an extra handy holder that you can have here. And like I said, they've got the new extra long one for being able to hold it, which is great. And you can actually put it in both ways. So if you've got a really big model that you just got pegged onto there, you can have it down over here so that you've got this a little bit more strength, and you can have the big model up on here and not have to worry about it getting any taller than that one. So yeah, super awesome stuff, and super thankful to both of these guys for supporting me and helping this out. So hopefully this will up the thin coats portion of the Deep Thoughts thin coats. I've just got to make sure to keep the deep thoughts coming just as strong. But thank you guys all. So thank the sponsors, and thank you guys all for watching. I really enjoy all of the support that you give, especially the people who support me on Patreon, the people who purchase my merchandise. I've got t-shirts available. You can check all those out in the description below, and all of it helps support and keep this channel going and putting out the content that I've been doing. So I really appreciate it all. But I thank you guys all for everything. I hope you have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and until next time, have fun.